There is a time when silence becomes more powerful than words, a moment when your decision to remain quiet says more about who you are than any speech you could ever give. We live in a world where everyone is rushing to be heard, to speak louder, to get the last word in. But here's the truth: being the loudest doesn't make you the wisest. In fact, sometimes it only reveals the fool within. Silence is an often misunderstood force. In a world that thrives on noise, we tend to believe that power comes from being heard, from filling spaces with our words. But the true essence of power lies in restraint, in knowing when not to speak. Silence is a discipline, a deliberate choice to hold back when it would be easy to rush forward. It allows for reflection, for measured thought, and for clarity in moments when chaos and confusion might otherwise cloud judgment. When you choose silence, you're not surrendering, you are giving yourself space to understand the full landscape of a situation. Silence creates a pause, and in that pause, power builds. It's a pause that allows you to assess the truth, to understand motives, and to see perspectives you may have missed in the heat of the moment. There is strength in knowing that you don't have to react immediately, that sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is to say nothing at all. Silence also gives power back to you. It's in those quiet moments that we reclaim our energy rather than letting it be drained by unnecessary words or arguments. We often underestimate how much influence we lose when we react impulsively, when we speak out of turn, or when we feel compelled to fill the silence with words that carry no meaning. In the constant flow of conversations, debates, and discussions, we often place more value on speaking than on listening. We are conditioned to believe that the one who speaks first or the loudest holds the upper hand. That verbal expression equals control. But real power, real wisdom comes from the ability to listen, truly listen, not just to words, but to the silences between them. Listening requires patience, discipline, and humility. It's a skill that allows us to absorb information, to understand different perspectives, and to process thoughts before forming a response. When we listen, we create a space for empathy. It's in listening that we connect with others on a deeper level, acknowledging their experiences, their emotions, their truths. This act of listening isn't just about hearing the words being spoken, it's about understanding the meaning behind them, sensing the unspoken feelings and thoughts that accompany them. Listening allows us to gather wisdom that we would otherwise miss if we were too focused on formulating our own response while the other person is still talking. Speaking, on the other hand, can often be reactionary and impulsive action driven by the need to assert oneself. We speak to be understood, to defend, to persuade, but too often we speak without fully comprehending the context of what's being said around us. Words, when spoken hastily or without thought, can easily be misunderstood or misused. When we prioritize speaking over listening, we risk missing the full picture, and our responses become shallow, disconnected from the reality of the conversation. Rash actions are often born from impulse, from the urgency to act without fully considering the consequences. In moments of frustration, anger, or even excitement, we may feel a sudden drive to do something, anything to resolve a situation, to assert control, or to express ourselves. But these impulsive actions, while they may provide temporary relief or a sense of accomplishment, often lead to regret, misunderstanding, and unintended outcomes. Acting too quickly can cloud our judgment, causing us to overlook vital details or make decisions based on incomplete information. Taking time to pause, to reflect, allows us to think critically about what's at stake. It's in this space between stimulus and response that we find clarity. By slowing down, we give ourselves the opportunity to examine our motivations, to consider the long-term impact of our actions, and to assess whether our choices align with our values and goals. Rash decisions can lead to irreversible consequences, damaging relationships, reputations, and even our own sense of self. Patience becomes the key to avoiding these pitfalls. It's about learning to be comfortable with discomfort, resisting the urge to act immediately when emotions are high. Rash actions are often driven by an emotional reaction rather than rational thought, and they tend to escalate situations that could have been resolved more peacefully. When we act without thinking, we hand over our power to the moment, allowing fleeting emotions to dictate our behavior. By avoiding rash actions, we reclaim that power, giving ourselves the chance to respond with intention, wisdom, and foresight. Humility in silence is a profound expression of inner strength and self-awareness. It's the recognition that not every situation requires your voice, not every challenge demands your immediate reaction, and not every moment is about you. In silence, there is an acknowledgement of the limits of our knowledge and understanding that we don't always have the answers, and that it's okay to simply observe and absorb. This humility doesn't come from weakness, but from a place of confidence in the understanding that our value is not determined by how often or how loudly we speak. There's a deep respect that comes with remaining silent, especially in moments where we might feel the urge to prove ourselves. We live in a society that glorifies constant expression, where people are often rewarded for being the loudest or most assertive, but there is an underappreciated elegance in the ability to hold back. Silence allows us to take a step back, to listen and to learn. It's a form of humility that says, I don't need to dominate this moment. I don't need to showcase my knowledge or opinions right now. It's the quiet confidence of someone who knows that wisdom often comes from listening and observing rather than speaking. True humility is understanding that silence can be more powerful than words. When we are silent, we make space for others to express themselves. We show that we value their input, that we are not just waiting for our turn to speak, but are genuinely interested in what they have to say. This act of listening with intention and patience is a form of respect, and respect is at the heart of humility. In being silent, we give others the gift of our attention, allowing them to be fully seen and heard, which in turn fosters deeper connections and understanding. Furthermore, silence in moments of tension or conflict is an extraordinary display of self-control. It requires humility to hold your tongue when provoked, to resist the temptation to defend yourself or retaliate. In these moments, silence can be a way of acknowledging that not every battle is worth fighting, and not every slight is worth responding to. It's a form of surrender, not to the situation or the other person, but to the understanding that your peace of mind is more valuable than the need to be right or to have the last word. This humility in silence also extends to personal growth. When we embrace silence, we create space for introspection, for confronting our own flaws and weaknesses without the need to justify or defend ourselves. In this quiet reflection, we come to terms with the fact that we are not perfect, and that's okay. Silence becomes a tool for self-discovery, allowing us to peel back the layers of ego and pride that often cloud our judgment. Through silence, we gain a clearer understanding of who we are, what drives us, and where we need to grow. In situations where others might expect you to speak to fill the air with opinions, explanations, or excuses, choosing silence demonstrates a profound level of humility. It shows that you are secure enough in yourself that you don't need validation from external noise. It shows that you trust your own internal compass and that you are comfortable with the idea that sometimes your silence speaks volumes more than your words ever could. Empty words are like echoes in a hollow chamber. They make noise but carry no substance. They are the words spoken without thought, without knowledge, and without true understanding. Often people feel an overwhelming need to speak, to fill the silence, even when they have nothing meaningful to contribute. This compulsion to be heard, to participate in every conversation, can lead to a flood of empty words, words that add no value, solve no problems, and serve no higher purpose. In the rush to speak, to be relevant or assert some form of authority, we sometimes forget the power of meaning behind our words. The danger of empty words is that they can often reveal more about a person than they intend. When people speak without thinking, they expose their lack of depth, their ignorance, or their insecurity. Foolishness isn't always in the things people do, it's often in the things they say. Empty words are a signal that someone is speaking for the sake of being heard, rather than out of any genuine intent to communicate or enlighten. And in doing so, they undermine their own credibility. The more a person speaks without thinking, the less others will value what they say, even when they do have something important to contribute. Empty words are also the product of speaking without listening. When people are more focused on what they want to say next, rather than truly understanding the conversation at hand, their responses become disconnected, surface level, and irrelevant. They are no longer engaged in dialogue, but in a performance where the goal is not understanding or communication, but to simply be present to fill the space with noise. This kind of speaking without intent or clarity can be more harmful than silence. It creates confusion, spreads misinformation, and fosters misunderstanding. Moreover, the foolishness of empty words can have significant consequences in both personal and professional settings. In relationships, speaking without meaning or care can damage trust. People begin to feel as though their conversations lack authenticity, and they become hesitant to engage on a deeper level. In professional environments, empty words can erode respect. Colleagues and superiors are less likely to trust or rely on someone who constantly speaks but never says anything of value. They may be seen as unreliable, out of touch, or simply someone who talks for the sake of talking. Over time, the accumulation of meaningless words can tarnish reputations, making it difficult to regain the trust and respect of others. Empty words also carry the weight of missed opportunities. Every time we speak without substance, we lose the chance to say something that could make a difference. Instead of contributing thoughtfully to a conversation, we allow our words to fall flat, missing the opportunity to influence, inspire, or connect. There is a responsibility that comes with speaking, a responsibility to ensure that what we say is purposeful, that it adds to the world rather than detracts from it. When we fail to recognize this responsibility, our words become nothing more than filler, meaningless sounds that pass through the air but leave no lasting impact. There is also a deep irony in the way empty words often make the speaker appear foolish. The more someone tries to fill the space with words, the more obvious it becomes that they are, in fact, saying very little. This incessant need to be heard, to assert oneself, often backfires, exposing the lack of substance behind the words. It becomes clear to everyone listening that the speaker is grasping at straws, trying to keep the conversation afloat without any real insight or knowledge. In this way, empty words serve as a mirror, reflecting the insecurities of the person speaking them, insecurities about being seen as uninformed, irrelevant, or out of the loop. In situations where someone uses empty words to impress or deceive, the truth eventually comes to light. People see through the facade, and the speaker's credibility is damaged. The more they talk without saying anything meaningful, the less people will believe or trust them in the future. They become known not for their wisdom or insight, but for their ability to say a lot without really saying anything at all. Their words become like background noise, easily ignored because they lack substance and meaning. Empty words are also often driven by ego, the need to appear knowledgeable, to maintain control, or to dominate a conversation. But in doing so, people often end up proving the opposite. Their need to constantly speak reveals their fear of being seen as less than, as someone without value or knowledge. And yet, in their rush to speak, they reinforce the very perception they are trying to avoid. Speaking for the sake of speaking does not command respect or authority. It highlights a lack of self-awareness and depth. It shows a person who is more concerned with appearances than with truth, more invested in being heard than in listening, learning, or growing. In the end, empty words are a form of intellectual laziness. Rather than taking the time to think, reflect, and contribute something meaningful, people opt for the easier route, saying whatever comes to mind without consideration for its value or relevance. This thoughtless speech wastes time, both for the speaker and the listener. It turns potentially productive conversations into exercises in futility, where nothing is gained, no insights are shared, and no progress is made. In a world full of noise, the real power lies in knowing when to speak and when to remain silent. Silence is not a sign of weakness, but a reflection of inner strength, self-awareness, and wisdom. It allows us to listen more deeply, avoid impulsive actions, and rise above the temptation to fill the air with empty words. Speaking without purpose diminishes our credibility, while thoughtful silence and meaningful words elevate our presence. To avoid being the fool, we must embrace the quiet moments, learn from them, and choose our words with care and intention. In the end, it's not the number of words spoken that defines us, but the weight and impact of the few we choose to say.